going to make a dent in the deficit. Here to disagree with me, though, is Christian Dorsey from the Economic Policy Institute. Christian, thank you so much for coming back to the show. You are always a spirited debate partner. Tell me why you like this.
Well, I tell you, Melissa, to me, this is not so much about the revenue that it would raise, but about the message and the principle that it stands for. And that is that we can't in this country have a situation where people are making millions of dollars and yet effectively paying lower tax rates than America's middle class families. The principle of this rule is actually what's most important. The revenue that it raises, it's important because it's not chump change, but it's not in and of itself going to change our deficit conversation. But the principle is one that's extremely important.
But you're talking about wealthier people. I mean, wealthier people pay a higher average tax rate. I mean, everybody pulls out the stat that they want to look at. If you look at the average tax rate of the top 1%, it is 23%, almost 24%. I mean, the average tax rates for taxpayers across the board is like 11%. They're already paying more than double what most people are paying if you look across the board at all the taxes they're paying.
Well, and actually, no, if you look at all the taxes that middle class families are paying, which includes also payroll taxes, which are not necessarily at the high end. When you look at state taxes, you look at a tax code that is much closer together than the 23-11 split that you mentioned. But just keeping it strictly to federal income taxes, we have the middle class, which is at about 15%. And what we have are some millionaires who are able to pay around 15%. That's about 22,000 in this country. And then we have about 1,500 who pay no federal income tax at all. That is absolutely unconscionable.
I'm assuming that you know that this is only going to raise $47 billion over 10 years, $5 billion in the first year. I mean, in fact, if we decided to do this every year in order to pay down the debt, it would take 3,200 years in order to pay down the debt. This would run the federal government for half a day, this $5 billion or $47 billion over 10 years. It would pay the salaries for every federal civilian employee for about a week and a half. So I don't understand why this becomes, I think I do understand. I mean, why make this such a huge issue when it's such a tiny dollar amount? To me, it's about turning this country into a war over class warfare.
See, I think the reason it's become such a big issue, because if you look at this, if you can't figure out how you make it so that millionaires don't pay zero income tax or pay less than middle class families.
Who pays zero income tax? I don't know. I mean, who got away with paying zero income tax? I would like to know how to do that.
Melissa, 1,500 millionaire families paid no federal income tax in 2009. And if you can't figure out a way to capture their fair share, then how else are you going to fix the problems in our tax code? If you can't do this basic thing,
I'll tell you how you close all the loopholes. You make one rate or three rates for everyone. You make it very simple so that's a loophole problem. That's not a marginal rate problem. That's not a go attack wealthy people problem and discourage entrepreneurship and discourage people from trying to make money and get ahead and be successful.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have somebody like Warren Buffett out there doing this, it's about attacking wealthy people. And I just don't think that's what America's about.
Well, Warren Buffett himself, among the wealthiest there is, so I don't think you can accuse him of class warfare. And this is not just about loopholes, Melissa. This is about people like...
I think I absolutely can. I think he's a mouthpiece for the White House. I think he's come out time and again to do their bidding. I mean, I think that he also lobbies the government on behalf of his investments. He gets a lot out of it. I mean, I think a lot of what he does is actually incredibly disingenuous.
Well, Melissa, what he's talking about is the fact that Warren Buffett, Mitt Romney, other people derive most of their income from capital gains, which are taxed at a 15% rate. That's not a loophole. That's a statutory intent of the tax code. And what you have then is the incredible amassment of wealth.
Good. So change that and you get $5 billion. I mean, change that. Do this.
Listen,
let's do it and take it off the table. Do this. You get $5 billion.
I would love it.
How is that going to help you?
Washington has not made it happen. Washington has not been able to do it.
Do you know that the Buffett rule would reduce the 10-year deficit under President Obama's budget by 0.7%? What you're talking about is 0.7%. This argument is about 0.7%. Why do we keep having this conversation instead of a conversation about controlling spending, about really closing this gap or doing something else to really close this gap. I mean, I just wonder why this conversation keeps coming to the fore instead of one that would actually solve the problem. Because
Melissa,
to me, it's about pitting people in this country against each other, which is not going to get us anywhere.
But, Melissa, in the last year, we've cut $1 trillion in spending. President Obama is proposing cutting another $3 trillion in spending. We have not been able to agree on $1 of revenue increases. That's the problem. And this rule is looking at what should be low-hanging fruit, an easy call, and yet it's become a contentious issue.
It's only because it become a contentious issue because Democrats keep putting it out there as to distract from how big the gap really is and what it's going to take to really get there. But, Christian, thank you so much for coming on. I always appreciate it. You always make great points.
Thank you, Melissa.
I really appreciate your time. Next on Money, there are two things you thought you'd never hear together. ExxonMobil